if you took a walk past any local sports complex this past weekend or even just scroll through your social media feed for 5 minutes, you would probably come away thinking, we are living in the absolute golden age of youth sports.
Yeah, on the surface, it certainly looks that way. I mean, the industry is booming right now.
It is genuinely impressive,
Yeah.
right? You see 8-year-olds with private swing coaches.
Mhm.
You have 10-year-olds playing on 3 different travel teams, flying across the country for weekend tournaments. The uniforms look professional. The facilities are better than what some colleges had 20 years ago. The sheer amount of time and energy and, well, money being poured into making kids elite is completely unprecedented.
Oh, absolutely. The investment, both emotional and financial, is at an all-time high. Parents are just all in.
So if we follow basic logic here, I mean, the idea that more input equals better output, we should be churning out the healthiest, most dominant, most athletic generation of humans in history. We should basically be seeing super athletes everywhere you look.
Right, you would think so. That is the intuitive leap that everyone makes. But the data tells us the exact opposite story.
And that is the central paradox we are grappling with today for our deep dive. We have more elite training at younger ages than ever before, yet the result isn't a generation of super athletes. It is a generation defined by overuse injuries, massive burnout rates, and, surprisingly, performance plateaus before these kids even get a driver's license.
Yeah, we are seeing a fundamental breakdown in the system. We have high school athletes who can execute a highly specific skill like, a perfect curveball or a step-back three-pointer, but they lack the foundational strength to land a simple jump without blowing out a knee. They are technicians, but they are not athletes.
Which is terrifying, honestly. So to figure out why this more is better approach is feeling so hard, we are diving into a comprehensive guide today called Foundations of Longevity, the Athletic Development Blueprint by the IYCA team. And I have to say, reading through this source material, it doesn't read like a standard training manual. It feels much more like an intervention.
It is absolutely an intervention. It is a loud call to reset the entire youth sports culture. The IYCA team is arguing that we have fundamentally confused playing sports with athletic development, and those are two vastly different things.
I think that is where most of us, myself definitely included, get tripped up. I certainly assumed they were synonyms. Like, if your kid is playing soccer 4 nights a week, surely they are developing as an athlete.
Not necessarily. In fact, the source argues that the current model of early specialization, meaning doing one thing all the time from a very young age, is actually creating what they call lower performance ceilings.
That phrase really stuck with me, lower performance ceilings. Because as a parent or a coach, you naturally think you are giving them a head start. You think, if I start them at age 6, they will be miles ahead of the kid who starts at 10. But this blueprint suggests you are actually capping how good they can eventually become.
Exactly. You might produce a dominant 10-year-old. You might win the state championship for 5th graders. But you are sacrificing the 18-year-old version of that kid. And to understand why, we have to look at the mechanism of injury and physical development. The source points out that we are producing athletes who are physically fragile simply because they skipped the basics.
They mentioned the social media trap in this context, which I thought was a fascinating observation.
Oh, it is a huge driver of this entire problem. You see a clip on Instagram of a kid doing some incredibly complex, high-intensity agility ladder drill with resistance bands attached to their waist, and it looks cool. It looks elite. So parents think, my kid needs to do that immediately to keep up.
Right. It is performance chasing. It's looking for the hack.
It is.
Yeah.
But often those flashy drills are just distractions. They are the icing on a cake that hasn't even been baked yet.
Wow.
The source is very clear on this point. You cannot skill your way out of a structural deficit. If the body literally cannot handle the load, the fancy skill simply does not matter.
So let's define the terms then. If true athletic development isn't just more soccer practice or flashy Instagram ladder drills, what is it? How does the IYCA actually define it?
They define it as the long-term systematic progression of physical literacy, movement quality, strength, speed, power, coordination, and resilience. And the key phrase here is across childhood and adolescence. It is a slow burn. It is not a 6-week summer camp.
The metaphor they use throughout the source is building a house, which I found really helpful to visualize.
Right. Imagine sport-specific skills, the shooting, the throwing, the tactical awareness as the 2nd or 3rd floor of the house. Most people right now are trying to build the 3rd floor before they have even poured the concrete foundation.
And the foundation in this case is movement competency.
Yes. Can you balance on one leg? Can you properly absorb force when you jump and land? Can you coordinate your upper and lower body in a fluid motion? If that foundation is cracked because you skipped it to focus entirely on sports skills, and then you try to load it with heavy competitive volume, the house collapses. That is the ACL tear. That is the stress fracture. That is the mental burnout.
So the goal isn't to build a specialist at age 10. It is to build an athlete first and then mold them into a specialist later on.
Correct. Develop the engine first, then tune it for the specific race. You want a wide base of support so you can build a much higher peak later.
Now this leads us to the most technical and I think maybe the most critical part of the document, the distinction between chronological age and biological age. I will be totally honest, before reading this deep dive material, I treated those as the exact same thing. A 13-year-old is a 13-year-old.
And that is exactly how the entire youth sports industry is organized. You play on the U12 team because you were born in 2014. We organize everything by birthday. But biologically, that is a terrible way to program physical training.
The source gives this really startling example of two kids who are both exactly 13 years old. Walk us through that scenario.
Yes. So chronologically, they are twins. They have the exact same birthday. But biologically, they can be separated by as much as 4 or 5 years.
5 years. I mean, that's the difference between a child and a young adult.
It really is. One of them might be a late bloomer who hasn't even started puberty yet. Their hormones are dormant. Their bones are still fusing. Biologically, they are effectively 9 or 10 years old. The other kid might be an early maturer, fully deep into their growth spurt, or even finishing it up. They have testosterone flowing. They have real muscle mass. They have significant height.
So if I am a coach, and I run the exact same conditioning drill with the exact same intensity for both of those kids, just because they're both on the U13 roster, I am making a massive mistake.
It is essentially coaching malpractice. You are undertraining one and severely overtraining, and most likely injuring the other. This concept of biological readiness is the crux of the whole problem. You simply cannot train a prepubescent body the same way you train a postpubescent body.
And this is where the growth spurt factor comes in. The source gets into the biomechanics of this, and I want to unpack it for you listening because I think parents see this happen and don't actually know what they are looking at. It isn't just that kids get taller, it is that the physical machine changes entirely.
Right. The clinical term is peak height velocity. Think about the basic physics of it. Your bones are growing incredibly rapidly. The femur gets longer. That changes the lever arm for literally every movement the kid makes. But here is the catch. The soft tissue, meaning the muscles and tendons, often lag behind that rapid bone growth. They get stretched incredibly tight, like a rubber band over a box that is getting too big.
So you have tighter muscles pulling on longer levers. That sounds like a recipe for extreme awkwardness.
Exactly. And on top of that physical tension, the nervous system, the software running the body, hasn't updated to the new hardware yet. The brain essentially loses track of where the limbs are in space because those limbs are significantly longer than they were just last month.
This is the classic baby giraffe phase.
That is the perfect image for it. You see a kid who was a smooth, highly coordinated athlete at age 11, and suddenly at 13, they are tripping over the soccer ball. They look clumsy. They look like they have never played the sport before in their life.
And here is the tragedy the source points out. If a coach doesn't understand that this is a completely natural biological phase,
they misinterpret it entirely. They see that clumsiness and think, oh, Johnny isn't trying hard enough today, or they think he lost his touch, or even worse, they conclude he is just not talented anymore.
So they cut him from the team, or they yell at him from the sidelines to focus, when what he is actually dealing with is a massive physiological recalibration.
Precisely. They are punishing biology, when what that kid actually needs is for the coach to back off, reduce the training load, and help them patiently relearn how to move their brand new body.
That is a massive paradigm shift. It means we need a roadmap that isn't just focused on getting better at winning games this weekend. The IYCA source outlines 4 distinct stages of development to help with this. I want to walk through these because they provide a really clear filter for parents to check their own kids' schedules against.
Let's do it. It is a fantastic framework.
Stage 1 is early childhood, roughly ages 6 to 9. The current culture says this is the time to pick a sport, hire the private coach, and get serious. What does the blueprint actually say?
The blueprint says do the exact opposite. This stage is entirely about movement literacy. The key words they highlight here are play, rhythm, balance, confidence, and joy.
Play-based strength.
Yes. Climbing trees, crawling around, jumping off things, tumbling in the grass. It is unstructured, but it is vital. This is where the nervous system learns how to fire. This is where they learn how their body interacts with the physical world.
So we shouldn't be teaching the tactical nuances of a complex zone defense to 7-year-olds.
Absolutely not. And yet go to any local field on a Saturday morning and you will see coaches screaming about defensive positioning. It is absurd. If you crush the joy at this stage with rigidity, you will lose them later. You are building the love of movement first and foremost.
Okay, moving up the ladder. Stage 2 is pre-adolescence, roughly ages 10 to 12.
This window is often called the skill hunger years. Their brains are absolute sponges right now. This is a great time for learning. We are expanding their movement skills and introducing foundational strength learning, how to squat, lunge, push, and pull properly with their body weight. But, and this is critical, we must actively resist specialization here.
Why is resisting specialization so important at this specific age? I feel like this is exactly where the social pressure really ramps up for families.
Because you want to build a broad library of physical movements. If they play soccer, basketball, and maybe do some gymnastics or martial arts on the side, they learn how to rotate, how to jump, how to land in vastly different chaotic environments. If they only play one sport year-round, they become rigid. They develop overuse patterns because they make the exact same specific motions thousands of times a week.
It's basically like investing. You want a diversified portfolio, not just putting all your money into one single stock.
Exactly. Diversification reduces your risk and increases your long-term yield. The best athletes in the world usually played multiple sports until late high school. That is not an accident.
Then we hit the true danger zone. Stage 3 is adolescence, the growth spurt years we talked about earlier. The source calls this phase movement recalibration.
This is undoubtedly the most misunderstood phase in youth sports. Because the body is changing so rapidly, the focus shouldn't be on peak competitive performance. It should actually be on maintenance. We are literally reteaching coordination.
And heavily managing the workload.
Yes. The growth plates, those soft areas at the ends of the bones where the actual growth happens, are incredibly vulnerable to stress during this time. If you hammer a kid with high-volume, repetitive impact during this phase, you are practically begging for Osgood-Schlatter disease or stress fractures in the spine.
So ironically, just as the competition starts getting serious in high school, and just as the college scouts might start looking, the physical training volume often needs to drastically drop.
It is totally counterintuitive, but yes, you need to pull back to protect the chassis while the car is being rebuilt. You can still train, obviously, but you change the entire focus to movement quality, not intensity or volume.
And finally, stage 4 is post-peak height velocity, mid to late teens. The body is finally settled down.
Now the brakes come off. The hormonal system is fully online. The bones are fused and solid. Now we can finally chase performance. We layer on the heavy sport specificity, the real power development, the anaerobic conditioning. We can turn up the intensity because the physical structure can finally handle it.
It seems so logical when you lay it out linearly like that. It makes perfect physiological sense. But looking at the real world, we are constantly skipping steps. We are trying to do stage 4 work, the high-intensity power output, with stage 2 bodies.
We are trying to install a Ferrari engine into a go-kart chassis. It might look fast for a brief second, but it is going to shake itself apart.
What is the true cost of that? I mean, besides the obvious acute injuries we see all the time, the source mentions the lower performance ceiling again in this section. Can you break that down? Why does starting early actually make you worse later on?
Think about it like learning a language. If you only learn a very specific dialect of a language, you can communicate really well in that one specific village. But if you learn the deep roots of the language, the grammar, the syntax, the vocabulary base, you can learn any language you want.
Okay, I really like that analogy.
Early specialization teaches the specific dialect of one sport. You get really good at kicking a ball with your right foot, but you never develop the hip mobility, the core stability, or the spatial awareness that comes from a broad athletic base. So when you get to age 18 and everyone else has eventually caught up on the sport skills, the athletes with the better movement engine, the ones who have better grammar and syntax of movement, will completely blow past you. You simply don't have the hardware to adapt to higher levels of play.
That is a very hard pill to swallow for the parent who genuinely thinks they're doing the right thing by hiring the private skills coach at age 7.
It is. It goes against everything the culture is telling them. But the source is incredibly blunt about this. They say we cannot skill our way around structural deficits. No amount of fancy ball handling drills will fix a fundamental lack of hip stability. If the structure isn't there, the skill will eventually fail under competitive pressure.
So we have the diagnosis, we have the roadmap, but implementing this in real life, That is the really hard part, because you are fighting the current. You are fighting the fear of missing out.
You are fighting a massive industrial complex. Youth sports is a multi-billion-dollar business right now.
The source talks about patience as a performance strategy. I love that specific phrasing. It reframes patience from being a passive thing, just waiting around, to being an active, deliberate, competitive advantage.
It is the ultimate arbitrage in youth sports. Everyone else is buying high and selling low. They are burning their kids out for cheap plastic trophies at age 11. If you are patient enough to build the foundation properly, you are playing the long game. You will eventually pass them when they inevitably break down. It takes serious guts to be patient when everyone else around you is sprinting, but it wins in the end.
But to actually do that, you need the adults in the room to get on the same page. The blueprint highlights a major friction point in the system, which they call silos versus collaboration.
This is the dirty little secret of youth sports organization. You have the sport coach, the soccer coach, the basketball coach. Their job is tactics, winning games, and building team culture. Then, ideally, you have a performance professional, a strength and conditioning coach. Their job is movement quality and injury prevention.
And usually these two people have never even met each other, let alone exchanged an email about the athlete.
Never. They exist in total silos. The sport coach runs the kids into the ground with punishment sprints on a Tuesday because they lost a game on Sunday. Then the kid goes to the private strength coach the very next day, and the strength coach wonders why the kid's knees are swollen and they can't even do a basic squat.
The athlete is basically the wishbone being pulled apart by two different adults.
Exactly, and the athlete always pays the price. The source argues forcefully that we have to break these silos down. We need a performance team approach.
What does that actually look like practically? Because in pro sports, sure, they have that, but for a local 14-year-old,
It starts with basic communication. It means the sport coach says, hey, we have a really heavy tournament this weekend with 4 games. So the strength coach says, okay, great to know. We will switch to a pure recovery and mobility session on Monday instead of lifting heavy. Or in the off season, the sport coach backs off completely so the strength coach can actually build raw power without interference.
so it is a coordinated ecosystem centered entirely on the kid's health, not the coach's ego or the arbitrary league schedule.
That is the dream scenario. But it requires adults checking their egos at the door. It requires admitting that more is not always better.
I can easily hear a parent listening to this right now saying, I am sold. I want this for my kid. But the coach doesn't get it. The local league doesn't get it. The other parents on the team think I'm crazy for not playing year-round travel ball. How do you actually create change in such a resistant, entrenched community?
The IYCA source addresses this directly, and I really appreciate that they don't give a fluffy, unrealistic answer. Their answer is essentially to educate yourself first, and then simply practice it. Do not preach it.
Right, don't become the annoying science parrot in the team group chat.
Exactly. You cannot win an argument against culture on a Facebook thread. People are way too invested in the status quo, but you can absolutely win with results.
Let the result be the marketing campaign.
Precisely. When your child is the one who is consistently healthy year after year, who isn't emotionally burned out, and who is still rapidly improving at age 16, while the supposed stars from the U10 team are dropping out of the sport with stress fractures, people will naturally start to ask what you're doing differently.
You just have to be the living example of the long game.
Yes. You demonstrate quietly that a healthier athlete is ultimately a better athlete.
It really all comes down to redefining what success looks like in our culture. We are just so obsessed with the now. We want the highlight reel today so we can post it online.
We truly are. We treat children like miniature professionals, but they aren't pro athletes who just happen to be short. They are actively developing organisms. They are biologically distinct from adults.
The phrase that perfectly sums it up for me, from the source, is building athletes who last.
That is the entire mission. Not just athletes who win a medal today, but athletes who are physically capable of being active for life. We want them playing pickup basketball at age 40, not nursing chronic knee pain because of a training camp they did at age 12.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you listening with a thought to mull over on your own. We've talked a lot about biology, load management, and performance ceilings today, but ultimately this entire conversation is about values.
It really is.
If a championship trophy at age 12 comes at the cost of a knee surgery at age 16, was it actually a victory?
That is the heavy question everyone needs to ask themselves.
It is. If you are a parent or a coach listening to this, it is one you need to answer honestly.
Yeah.
Are you prioritizing the gratification of the now over the reality of the next level in your own approach to development?
It is definitely worth a serious think before the next season starts.
Huge thanks to the IOICA team for this incredibly detailed blueprint. It is a harsh wake-up call, but a deeply necessary and helpful one.
Absolutely. The
Mm.
research is fantastic.
And thanks to you for joining us on this one. We will catch you on the next deep dive. Stay curious.